I'm a recovering alcoholic. I used to be an absolute animal. But about 5 years ago, I moved to a small town in Kansas, got a good job, and managed to create a nice, simple life for myself. I hadn't had a drink in 3 years, and I was really proud of myself for being able to turn my life around. It's not an easy thing to do, and I still struggle with my addiction every day. One day, I was walking home from work, as I often do, when I saw a strange figure up ahead. I thought it was just a weird person at first, but the closer I got, the more unnerving the reality of the situation was. Standing in front of me was a man in a suit with a lizard's head. It had these awful red eyes and razor-sharp teeth. I figured it had to be a man in a costume, but even from a distance, I was seriously freaking out. My fight or flight kicked in, and my heart started pounding. I didn't know if this guy was going to rob me, or fight me, or what. Then, as soon as he looked at me, he disappeared around the corner of the building. I ran over to see what he was up to, but he was nowhere to be found. I absolutely panicked, and I took off from there. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept trying to tell myself someone was just playing some kind of joke on me, but its freaky eyes are burned into my memory forever. The next day, I called my sponsor at the time and told him I was really freaking out and was desperately trying not to drink. When he asked me what was going on, I told him I saw a lizard man and I was in fear for my life. My sponsor thought that I was on a bender and told me to get help immediately. The more I pleaded with him, the crazier he thought I was, and it was just helpless to try and convince him otherwise. I went back to the spot where I'd seen the lizard man and looked all around the building, but didn't find anything out of the ordinary. I asked some of the shop owners if they saw anything strange there lately, and they all said they didn't see anything out of the ordinary. When I asked about the lizard man, people just assumed that I was a nut job. One store clerk kicked me out of the store just for asking. This was when I began to suspect that the lizard man was this store owner. Could it be that the lizard man let his charade of being a normal person down at just the right time? Could it be that I was onto him? After that, I started seeing lizard people everywhere. At the grocery store, walking down the street, driving in cars. I mean, everywhere. I started seeing them walking around my neighborhood and hovering around my house. It was almost like they were watching my every move. I tried to talk to some of my friends about it, but they thought I had a relapse and encouraged me to go get some help. My world was caving in. Everywhere I turned, there was no help in sight. The lizard men were ruining my freaking life. As time went on, I became more and more obsessed with the idea that these creatures were running the world. I started to see connections between crimes, strange events, and the lizard people. It was like I was uncovering some kind of conspiracy. My mind was constantly racing. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus on work. Hell, was I working for lizard men? My mind was consumed by the idea that these creatures were watching me, that they knew everything I was doing, and they were responsible for the entire world as we know it. I spent countless hours researching lizard people, government cover-ups and conspiracies, other accounts of people who had seen the lizard people. I read every article and watched every video I could find. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a video about reptilian shapeshifters then everything clicked for me. According to the video, these creatures had been around for centuries, and they were controlling the world from behind the scenes. They had infiltrated every level of government and were manipulating the masses. Finally, it all made sense. The Kennedy assassination, Area 51, the mind control lab in Alaska, alien abductions. The government has provided closure on none of these things. And why? because they don't want us to know the truth, that we are being overrun by reptilian shapeshifters. Now, I'm an absolute recluse, spending most of my time in my basement, researching everything I can about these lizard people. Look it up, people. It's amazing how many people have seen them with their own eyes. Celebrities, politicians, activists, billionaires. I don't know the exact percentage, but an alarming fraction of them are reptilian shapeshifters. I was blind before I saw it with my own two eyes. I used to think that all conspiracy theories were nonsense. I mean, when you first hear this stuff, who in their right mind would believe that there are lizard people running the world? But after my own experience, I can't deny the reality. A veil has been lifted, and now I can see things that I never noticed before. I'm constantly on high alert, watching for any signs of the reptilian shapeshifters. I needed a change, so I moved down to Texas. I gotta say, that was the best decision of my life. But one of my first nights I was down here, something happened to me that changed me. There was this local bar that caught my eye, and I wanted to shake off the stress of moving and the trauma that I was moving away from. Shortly after I sat down and got myself a drink, this friendly man in a very expensive wine red suit sat down next to me. Now, being a blue-collar man myself, I usually don't get along with people that take themselves so seriously. But right off the bat, I couldn't help but notice he was one of the most charismatic and charming individuals I ever had the pleasure of talking to. We had quite a few drinks, and I was telling him about all the hardships I had dealt with that caused me to move down here. And I was amazed that one person was able to get me to open up so wholly and so quickly. I'm usually quite reserved. It was then that I realized that something might be off about this situation. Was he trying to rob me? Was he trying to distract me? Was he trying to have his way with me? But every time I got suspicious, he'd say something that would make me laugh and light up. And at that time, nobody could make me do either of those things. It was bizarre. I didn't think too much about it at first, but the conversation with this man got deeper and deeper. He asked me if I believed in souls and energy, and God, and all that stuff. Then he asked me if I believed in hell, and then he asked me if I would exchange part of myself for great wealth, power, and success. I said that I think every man does that to some extent, and that we probably wouldn't have jobs if we didn't have to do that. Then he asked me if I would exchange part of myself to fulfill all my deepest desires. I thought about it for a while and said, maybe. He asked me if I would give part of myself for forbidden knowledge and experiences that I would never have otherwise. Then it took a weird turn. The man's whole demeanor changed, and he looked at me intensely in the eyes, as if he couldn't contain his excitement any longer. He asked me what I would give in return if he could take the pain that I was running from, feeling like a fool for telling a stranger my deepest, darkest secret. I went to leave, and he stood up in front of the door. He looked completely different now. Then he asked me if I would sell my soul to prevent my loved ones from being hurt. Emotions were running hot, and I had a lot to drink, so this question prompted me to swing at him. To my astonishment, my fist went right through him, and I punched the brick wall by the door so hard I broke my hand. But next thing I know, the barkeep is throwing me out of the bar and threatening to call the cops. My hand is a broken mess, and the man I was talking to was nowhere to be found. I know what you're thinking. You had a lot to drink. You got into a bar fight. Your memory is a hazy mess, and the man was a result of the drunken hallucination. Let me just say this. The experience shook me so badly that I, a complete non-believer in the supernatural, now go to church every Sunday, read my Bible every day and pray for protection and guidance every day. I know that the man was a demon trying to take my soul. He knew I was weak. He knew I was vulnerable. It was the lowest point I had ever been at in my entire life. Let me tell you, this is when he comes. Not when you're on top of the world. Not when you're doing good. Not when you're doing the right thing. He comes to you in a moment of weakness. Would I have sold my soul to the devil that night? Perhaps, if he had been more patient and asked me in a better way. My answer would have been yes. This thought keeps me up at night, and I can still see him standing by the door, no longer the nice man at the bar. His eyes black, his skin gray. It was no hallucination. It was the most real thing I had ever experienced. It made me realize we are but chess pieces in the battle of good versus evil. Free will is a gift, but total free will is an illusion. It was a horrifying experience, but I learned a lot from it. I realized how vulnerable we all are and how easily we can be deceived. The devil at the bar was so convincing, so charismatic, and I was so close to falling for his tricks. It's a sobering thought to know that there are beings out there who want nothing more than to deceive and destroy the good in us. I know that Satan and his demons are real, but I also know that God is more powerful than any of them. I encourage everyone I meet to get in touch with the good within and to reach out to God. Without him, this existence is flimsy and abysmal. I have no idea what the future holds, but I know that I'm better equipped to face whatever comes my way. My encounter with the demon taught me that there is more to this world than we can see with our eyes. It's up to us to be vigilant and to protect ourselves from the darkness that is always lurking just beneath the surface. I moved to Florida a few years ago for work. I love it here and don't miss the cold at all. The heat can be pretty intense though. As far as outdoor exploration goes, there are all kinds of things to see in Florida, and I'm always on the hunt for a good hiking trail. I was on one of my hikes when I saw something moving in the distance. At first, I thought it was a crazed lunatic in a ghillie suit, maybe a hunter. But as it got closer, I realized it wasn't a person at all. I know it sounds crazy, but man, this was something otherworldly. It was like something you would see in Star Wars. It kind of looked like Cousin It from the Addams Family, but it was green and had glowing red eyes. It was completely covered in green foliage, which hung all the way down to the ground. It was one of those moments where you keep blinking to make sure if you're actually seeing what you're seeing. I figured my mind had to be playing tricks on me, but there it was, clear as day. Then all of a sudden, it just stopped, and it stared right at me. Its eyes seemed to bore into my very soul, and I started panicking, man. Every muscle in my body was tense as I tried to figure out what the creature was going to do next. I couldn't move, couldn't take my eyes off of it, and I knew that any sudden movement on my part could provoke it into action. The silence was deafening, and I could hear my own breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Time seemed to stand still as I stood there, frozen in fear, with the Moss Man only a short distance away. We both stood there for what felt like a freaking eternity, and my heart was pounding. In that moment, everything happened so fast. The Moss Man, who had been eerily still just seconds before, suddenly charged full speed right at me. It ran like nothing I had ever seen before. My instincts kicked in, and I took off as fast as I could. I could hear that thing's heavy footsteps chasing after me, and its ragged breaths were deep and guttural, like a freaking demon. I ran as fast and as long as I possibly could, and when I finally stopped to catch my breath, the thing was nowhere to be found. I didn't tell anyone about my encounters at first, but I guess I was acting strangely, and my buddy took me out for drinks to cheer me up. He asked me what was wrong, and I spilled the beans for what must have been an hour. Of course, he laughed and thought I had lost my mind. But after I told him how close I came to dying, he finally believed me. He told me we had to go back and take care of the thing, but I told him I never wanted to go back there again. That's when he said it might have been a Bigfoot. And that's when reality hit me. We were dealing with something truly paranormal. He spent the night at my place that night, and we spent the rest of the night researching paranormal encounters in the area, trying to find any information that might shed light on what I had seen. As we delved deeper, we came across a phenomenon that had been reported in the area called the Moss Man. It was described as a humanoid figure covered in moss and leaves that had been sighted by lots of different people over the years. We were both amazed and horrified at what we were reading, but it gave me some more comfort to know that I wasn't the only one who had seen something like this. I also don't think my friend fully believed me until our research, and that was quite validating for me. I figured this would give me some closure, but honestly, my mental health got worse and worse, and I couldn't stop thinking about the Moss Man. I couldn't sleep and would wake up at night reading and watching videos about the Moss Man. I became absolutely obsessed, and it changed me forever. The years passed, and things returned to normal slowly, but surely. But I was never the same after that. They say that ignorance is bliss, and I can attest to the truth of that. I often think about how simple and happy my life was before my encounter with the Moss Man. The encounter with the Moss Man changed me in ways I could have never imagined. Before that night, I had a simplistic and naive view of the world. I believed that everything could be explained and that there was a rational explanation for every mystery. But after coming face to face with the unknown, I now know that there are forces at work that we cannot comprehend. It has made me question everything I thought I knew about life, God, and the universe. It's hard to feel safe in a world where things like the Moss Man can exist. It's made me realize that there is so much more out there that we don't understand, so much that is beyond our comprehension. It's a humbling experience, and it's made me appreciate the simple things in life even more. I am more cautious now, more aware of the dangers that lurk in the shadows, but at the same time, I'm also more open-minded and curious. I'm constantly seeking out new knowledge and trying to understand the mysteries of the world around me. The encounter with the Moss Man may have changed me, but it's also given me a new perspective on life and the world we live in. I don't know, man. Everything is fair game now. Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, aliens, you name it. Before this, I thought all of that stuff was a bunch of nonsense. But all of that stuff could exist, and all I know is, I know nothing about the universe that I live in.